Okay, we start our recording here. This is an introduction in what is augmentative and alternative communication, and more or less um, it is a summary or a little bit another presentation of chapter one in the textbook. But I'm going to include some of the video clips. And the first video clip I want to show you is a video clip of a very short talk. I mean, the talk is longer, but it's just a very short part of the talk by Michael Williams, who is a very well-known AAC user in the American AAC community. And Michael Williams is going to talk about his AAC experience. And I want you to listen to it and watch for a second. Here we go.
Have I told you yet how I communicated with people during this phase of my life? I learned early on the vital social matter of verbal caffeine and fuels most societal interactions was that activity in which I couldn't easily participate. Fleeting social niceties, jokes, slices of juicy gossip were swept under my mental carpet so I could concentrate on conveying what I considered are really important thoughts in my mind. I did this using the most laborious method possible. I drew the letters of each word in the air with my finger while my would-be linguistic interlocutor winked, blinked, and performed all manner of mental gyrations, trying to figure out what the hell I was saying. My really, really important thoughts were typed on my standard manual typewriter at home, carried to the place of conversation, and presented to my listeners with the greatest solemnity, as if they were the Ten Commandments. Needless to say, with communication methods such as these, one has few friends.
Okay. Okay, so what did you see in this video? So Michael Williams has been for decades considered to be a leader in the field. Fortunately, he's not the only one anymore. There are a few. I mean, there are more role models than just Michael Williams. It's a successful person, a person who has something to say, who is very good at using AAC, and who actually raises often or improves the stereotype that many people have about AAC users. You also saw the device, and I'll talk about that in a minute about that. He talks also about his personal story, and what you may have noticed that he is using multimodality. He's not just using the device, he actually also established contact with the people by eye gaze. Now most AAC users, and most of the times, and also Michael Williams, when you're using AAC, you're not just using your device, you use all kind of other things. Sometimes people can speak at the same time or say a few things and can point to something. What is important is also is the efficiency. What you just saw now, actually, in that presentation is something that has been prepared. That is often a difference between, or let's say a characteristic, and maybe not so positive characteristics of AAC, that technically if you use it on the spot, if you create it on the spot like when people speak, so it goes very slowly. So if I ask you, okay, tell me something about what you did last night, you can just start talking about it. You don't have to prepare, you don't have to look for the words on your device. Now, if you are a device user and I ask you, tell me what you did last night, you cannot do it right on the spot. You can do it right on the spot, but it will take a lot of time. You have to find, okay, where is my word about, for example, you had the spaghetti evening, where is the word spaghetti, where is the word evening, and that will take you a lot of time. What you just saw that Michael Williams had done it. He had, of course, prepared and pre-programmed his talk because he was giving a talk in front of an audience. But if you in typical communication, you don't do that. And most of your communication you don't prepare ahead of time. You just do it on the spot, and that's an important thing to understand in AAC. That is one of the weak points, one of the critical points, and often one of the reasons why you have a phenomenon that is sometimes called device abandonment or method abandonment, and because often it felt like it's not really meeting the requirements of quick communication. Now compare what you're going to see now in this clip. Compare microvalues with individuals in this clip where you see here.
AAC devices allow people to get jobs. They allow families to carry on functioning. They allow users to live at home. All three benefits enhance life and save the government money.
Okay, so we will talk about the content, what these people just said at a later point. I just want to focus now on how they were communicating. Well, all of them except one guy, the bald guy who earlier spoke, all of them had prepared their messages ahead of time and were able to formulate it at a normal speed. The one person who had not done that, you see that you really had to wait for him to formulate this message, and so that has an enormous effect on the quality of the communication. Not only on the quality of the communication itself, but often on how the communication partners feel about that. Often even the willingness, the preparedness of communication partners to enter in communication with the person. Okay, here is a definition of what I call AAC. It is an augmentative and alternative communication, the term used to indicate the methods, the tools and the theories to use non-standard linguistic forms of communication. So a non-standard form is, for example, electronic communication by and with individuals without or with without functional speech and with limited functional speech. So many people, when they talk about AAC, they think about devices, which is only part of what it is, and so it's actually methods, tools, and the theories. So the methods is really what you are doing. Okay, so you have the use of non-standard modalities. For example, part of AAC is also the use of manual signs in communication with people who have autism. Okay, also what you often do is you have a kind of materialization. I think many of you are maybe familiar with oh no, I'm tripping on the word on communication system, where a person hands over a picture, physically hands it over to the communication partner. That handing over of the message is a form of materialization. Then the third thing is anything you modify to make the communication more successful and more likely to succeed. It could be speaking louder, getting closer to a person, but also things like using a combination of different modalities. The tools, of course, include non-tech communication forms and things that you don't need a device for, and of course non-tech materials, communication cards, a communication vest, and low-tech materials, and then the high-tech materials. In the past 10 years, all these things have kind of blurred together. And it used to be is that the high-tech materials, electronic materials, were things that were expensive, that cost a lot of money. Now with iPads and cell phone technology, many of these things you have actually in your own devices, even if you're not an AAC user, or you don't have to be an AAC user. There's some of the technology that has now become mainstream, and that also is used by non-AAC users. What are the AAC theories? Or AAC theories, and I think that's important for this course, are theories that explain what makes AAC different and are similar to typical communication, and why. So we will talk about that a lot. Is AAC actually really something different, or is it just a little bit of a variant of something that is being done by everyone? And then the second thing is, just looking into things that are different. Okay, if you are an AAC user, what in your language functioning, in your language acquisition, is different? And do you acquire language in a different way if you grow up as an AAC user or not? Is that really going to be the same thing or different? What are the standard linguistic forms of communication? It used to be speaking and listening, and the spoken word, producing or receiving the spoken words, and also reading and writing. Okay. Now today, in 2018, you could say, well, there are other standard forms that almost everybody uses: FaceTime, Facebook, and picture communication, and icons in text message. So there may be a shift that what are standard forms, so what everybody is using and what you are expected to use, that has changed, and that has become more fluid, and which is an interesting thought, that maybe the distinction between AAC users and non-AAC users have blurred a lot about. Non-standard forms of communication are gestures, vocalization, body positions and body orientation, use of graphic symbols, and eye gazing. Now, of course, everybody uses those, and that's nothing new. Everybody uses gestures, everybody uses vocalization. What is different is that sometimes in AAC you're gonna make these forms actually become the carriers of much more linguistic information. Okay, usually you don't communicate in gestures. You really just communicate in speech, and you use gestures for to support that, to illustrate. But you may, in the AAC, you may give much more weight on these other forms. Okay. In the past 2 decades, maybe 3 decades actually, electronic discoveries and developments have had a very strong impact on AAC, including the computer storage. Okay, that's no longer a problem. It used to be that even in AAC 10 years ago, the capacity of what a device could carry on information was limited. Now it's really, that is not an issue at all. Text-to-speech technology, voice technology, cell phone technology, including iPhones, that have developed. So, who is AAC for? A very simple definition, or a simple indication, is that it is for individuals without functional speech or who have very limited functional speech. Initially, when AAC started to become a discipline or a sub-discipline in speech-language pathology and in special education and in rehabilitation science, initially the main attention was for people who clearly had normal language skills, language potential, but who had problems with speaking and with the using of vocal expression. But and so initial research and initial developments have often been focused on children and adults with cerebral palsy. Actually, the people that we saw in the video clips in a few minutes ago are all people with cerebral palsy. Um, Now, so the population has increased, and more and more people of all kinds of pathologies are using AAC. And it also used to be that AAC was something that only a few speech language pathologists were specialized in, and the majority of speech language pathologists never did anything that was related to AAC. That's no longer the case. And the in the next in your generation, almost everybody will have AAC users in their practice. So earliest assumptions of AAC. So what was the earliest ideas in AAC? And let me first say, all these assumptions are no longer accepted. One assumption that existed initially is that AAC is only for a few chosen ones, people who cannot speak but who actually meet very high standards otherwise, people who are normal cognitively, have a normal linguistic skills. Then it was people would say, okay, let's try something different, let's try AAC. But if you were a person who could not speak, but your cognitive skills were obviously developmentally limited, then most people would not say, well, no, let's not bother and try AAC. So that was kind of almost a requirement to get AAC. Another assumption that from the past is that you would not start with AAC unless you have tried everything else. Really, AAC was seen often as the last resort. If you have failed with everything else, then let's do AAC. That has now almost turned around, that AAC is sometimes seen as something that can kick off or other, quote, normal or more typical forms of communication. Often also AAC was only seen as a solution for communication problems and nothing else. Well, AAC is actually more than that. AAC, as any communication, is actually just a facilitator for social development and also for cognitive development. For the simple reason that people don't communicate just for the sake of communication. You communicate because it helps yourself to understand the world better, to socialize with others, to build your knowledge, to be able to explore information and so on. So all these assumptions have been challenged. So AAC, if you would go back in old textbooks or in journal articles, the term AAC does not appear until the 1980s. Okay, and that gives the impression that the discipline did not exist until the 1980s. But in reality, the practice of using alternative forms of communication has been existed since forever. And I on purpose, I took this picture here of maybe your kindergarten teacher, who is using pictures with typical children. So pictures and visualization, which is a technique that is used in AAC. Many of the techniques and the principles used in AAC are often very much common sense principles, like visualization, and that has been around as long as education and special services have existed, even in their most primitive forms. Okay, a few basic principles. One principle is communication has many forms. That's what sometimes called multimodality. So speech is not the only form. Speech is an important form. It's a very powerful form. We really want to have speech, but if that's not an option, then there are alternatives, and these alternatives can also be very powerful. Another principle is, if you communicate, you always seek what is the most effective form. What is going to be effective is something that you can do, right? Because it's within your reach of your possibilities, and what works, what can be understood by others. In general, everybody will communicate several forms. And as I showed you when Michael Williams was talking, he was looking the audience in the eyes, and most people, they are not just using their device or whatever their AAC solution is. They actually may smile, they may point, maybe they may say something. That is that is called the combinatoriality. The last principle is that we are, as we communicate, everybody, AC users or not, that while you're communicating, you're really monitoring how well it is going, and you may switch throughout or during your communication, right, from one communication form to the other, or put in more or repeat something, maybe with a gesture, with a spoken word, with something, and so you actually switch from one thing to the other all the time. Words about terminology. Often people may ask, why is that? Do you have this picture of the shower here? Well, that is to explain you the difference between aided communication and unaided communication. What is unaided communication? Unaided communication is communication, it's a form of communication that you can do in the shower or right when you get out of the shower. All you need for that, for unaided communication, is just your own body. For example, natural speech, and if you can speak, that is a form of unaided communication. All you need to do for that is have your body, have your vocal folds, and so on. Manual signing is unaided communication. Aided communication is when you need something else besides your own body. For example, you need maybe picture cards. Okay, that is aided communication. Or you need a device. That is aided communication. You need something outside of yourself. Why do we make that difference, or that distinction, is because it may have an effect on the quality of your communication. It's not longer you just communicating, and there is something else that is actually added to you that you need to use for your communication. It has a number of effects. For example, if I am using a communication board, okay, with pictures, and I point to that communication board, what is very likely or very often happen is that people are no longer looking at me when they want to communicate with me. They look at my finger and the communication board. So my face-to-face, my eye gaze, my smile, my facial expression becomes less important because it's not relevant. People don't see me. These are all terms: AAC user, consumer, person who uses AAC, person with complex communication needs, person who uses AAC. These are all terms that have been used to indicate a person who is using AAC. In the last 10, maybe a little more than 10 years, the term that is often used is the term person with complex communication needs, CCN. I must say it's a term that I don't like. Why that I don't like it is because it's really a very ambiguous, vague term. Complex communication need. For example, if you are a stutterer, if you have severe fluency problems, I consider that a complex communication need that you have. But of course, it's not AAC. It's not a need for AAC. So I think that's a very, very vague. I personally just give preference to just saying what we're talking about. Very clear. I just say throughout the textbook also a person who uses AAC or a person who needs AAC, period. That's what it is. I believe that is very clear. Why do we have to make such a vague description about that? Other terms that I'm sure you're familiar with are communication, speech, and language. These things overlap partially, and we have and when we talk about AAC, but in most cases we talk about communication. So what we are using may not be a language, okay, but it is communication, or it can be language. For example, if you are using words on a communication board or in a device, so that would be language. A term that is often used in AAC is the term symbol, okay. And when it's used in AAC, it's often meant a representation on a device or on a piece of material, just a communication board that functions as a communication symbol. Now, I'm going to say about that. Oh, actually, I can go to my next slide. Okay, a symbol is only a symbol if it works as a symbol for you. Okay, so you see here a photograph of an escalator. Okay, and then you see a picture of an escalator, and then you see this person. Is this a symbol? If this picture of that escalator a symbol, I would say, well, it's a picture of an escalator. Will it function as a symbol only if this person, in this person's head, there's a relationship between this picture and the real thing? Okay, then it works as a symbol. If, for example, if I show this picture to my dog, okay, it's not a symbol for that dog. Okay, because the dog does not see the relationship between that picture and the reality. So, for something to function as a symbol, it has to be something that the person who will be the user needs to be able to see the connection. Then also back here to my previous slide is often people make the distinction between verbal and non-verbal. I don't use that very often, verbal and non-verbal, because it's not very clear. Verbal literally means with words, and non-verbal not with words. And often people actually mean vocal or non-vocal when you use speech or not speech. A distinction that I use is the distinction between linguistic and non-linguistic. Whether the system you are using is a language system. For example, if you create a number of pictures, and you actually could do that yourself. All you need is a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can make your own pictures and start using them as a communication system. That is non-linguistic. These pictures are not part of a linguistic system. They may work and may work for you or so, but it's not a linguistic system. Okay, so another term that is sometimes used is a symbol set and a symbol system. Let me try to explain what that is. A symbol set is, for example, if you go to the buy a number of magazines, okay, and you just cut out some photos from and pictures that you find in the magazine, and you paste them on a board or something, and then you have a communication board. If you do that, you have a set of symbols. All these pictures don't have anything to do with each other. They are not referring to each other. If you have a symbol system, then the pictures or the symbols that you have some kind of a relationship with each other. And I don't think I have a picture here that describes it. But sometimes, for example, if you're in a restaurant and you need to go to the bathroom, to the restroom, there is a very clear picture that shows you if it's the bathroom for the man and the bathroom for women, and the pictures that often are used are very clear. They actually refer to each other also. I mean, often, and the man picture is just like a stick figure, but the female picture, it may be the same stick figure, only but the difference that is like a little triangle that represents the skirt. That represents a system. Both symbols and other symbols actually have some similarities, and one symbol refers to the other. That is a symbol system. Why do we make that distinction? Is that if you understand the system well, you can almost predict how another symbol will look like. And I think there are some examples in the textbook, and we will talk about that more. Iconicity, transparency, and translucency. Iconicity is the general term that refers to symbols that are iconic, that have some kind of image value. If you look at it, and maybe if people explain what it is, then you understand better what it is. That is an iconic symbol. A transparent symbol is a symbol that most people will understand right away. For example, it can be just a picture of a beach ball. Well, that's transparent because everybody see, that's a beach ball. know what it is. It's very transparent. Um, Translucent is if you have a picture or a manual sign, right, that you may not understand right away, but once you understand it, you can make sense of it. And the picture that you see here on the slide is a picture of the manual sign that says year, American Sign Language manual signs for year. And if people explain you that in a year the Earth rotates around the Sun, okay, then you may understand. Okay, I see now the relationship. Then that's translucent. Other terms that are used related to AAC is dedicated communication device and a non-dedicated communication device. Very simple distinction. A dedicated communication device is a device that only is used and built for communication. A non-dedicated communication device is something that you can use for communication besides for other things. For example, your laptop, your iPhone, is a non-dedicated communication device. You can have an app or some kind of a function in it that you use for communication. Okay, but your laptop you can also use for other things, for whatever it is that you're using it. Your iPhone, you can make phone calls and all the other things you do with your iPhone. Why do we make that this distinction? It is an important distinction when it comes for funding. And if you have an insurance company that says, okay, I will fund or pay part of your device, most of them, they will say, we are not paying for a computer. We're actually paying for a communication device, because you're in Medicare, for example, okay, not for a computer. So they actually pay for a dedicated communication device. Now, often dedicated communication devices are, as you can suspect, are really part of a computer platform. And so often when you get it, when your insurance company agrees to pay for it, and you get your device, the non-communication functions of your device, let's say your word processor, your web browser, and all that, is inactivated. You cannot use it. You have to, and it's locked. You cannot use it, and then often you have to pay extra, and not paid by the insurance company, to have that unlocked. The term used in most of the insurance companies and in official legal papers is for a speaking device is an SGD, or a speech generating device. Other terms: a manual sign. A manual sign is a sign as it is used in sign languages, American Sign Language, for example. Sign language is, many people say in AAC that clients are using sign language, so that they have been trying to use sign language solutions. And in most cases, that's not true. What is been using, what people have used for example, with people with autism, is manual signing, not manual sign language. It's just a number of words, of signs, to communicate. Sign language, as you probably know, American Sign Language or other sign languages, are whole languages. Most of the autistic people, and that's not usually a purpose or a goal in the intervention of people for people with autism, most of them don't learn sign language and should not learn sign language. That's not the purpose. Gestures is also something that is not part of a linguistic system, but that is in most cases easily understood, and that's often part of AAC solutions. An emblem, I'll talk about that later, is a specific form of gesture that has some kind of a general understandability by many. Other terms is simultaneous communication. That refers to the fact that you really want to have AAC solutions where you have the alternative form combined with typical forms. Like, for example, you want people to sign, but at the same time you would speak. Okay, that is simultaneous communication. Another term that's sometimes used is total communication. Okay, this is an article from many years ago. I think it's 79 or 81, I'm not sure. I can't see it. A proposed augmentative and alternative communication model. And I use that, and I'll place it into our class website also. Not that I expect you to study it carefully, but just to have it as a documentation. A proposed augmentative and alternative communication model. It has had a very strong influence on myself. For the longest time I thought, or in my younger years, I thought that AAC is something very special, something different, and the frameworks that we typically use to understand communication, these frameworks don't apply to AAC. Now I understand that is not the case. You can actually very simple use the traditional framework that you're very familiar with to understand communication. You really have to understand that there are three parts. There is the sender, there is the message that gets transmitted, and then there is the receiver. And what you do as an AAC solutions is located at one of these three steps. This is another representation of what is going on. So here are, and so you could see is that you have many of the AAC solutions have to do with support the sender. I am a person, I cannot speak, I have trouble with that. Okay, my AAC solution, or most of my AAC solution, will help me with becoming a sender or being a sender. And so to understand where you're actually going to do something is to understand that what happens when people actually send a message out. Typically when you say something, when you express something, you have an intention to say it, you find the structure, you find the words, you put the words together, you find the phonological structure, and then you articulate. One or all of these things may be difficult for an AAC user. Okay, and so what are possible solutions? Okay, one solution that can be applicable for some AAC users is intentionality. Realizing that I have something to say and I'm going to do something that is communicative. That's just understanding intentionality. I want to do something and I want to have an effect on the people around me. So understanding that your behavior is communicative, has a communication, and I'm going to do it on purpose. This is something that is important for people who have severe developmental challenges. People who function, for example, at the pre-linguistic, at the pre-intentional level. And so the AAC challenge there will be actually to make them aware of that they can do something and that it will have an effect on their environment. And then the other standard support is articulation of the message, how you actually formulate the message. Here you have one example. It can be, for example, a manual sign. The person cannot speak because speaking is one of the most, let's say, difficult things, one of the most complicated things to do. Well, we're going to find an alternative that may be easier to perform than to speak, and so we're going to use manual signs. Okay, other things that are sometimes done to help the sender is to do something with the lexicon. The lexicon is all the words that the person knows. Now, a typical communicator, let's say a young person, a young adult, knows 10,000 of words. Okay, and so, and for most people that's not a problem. Okay, you know 10,000 of words, but somehow when you communicate, for example, you are talking about things in the kitchen, the right word seems to pop up out of these 10,000 of words. But maybe sometimes a problem, and sometimes is a problem with AAC users, that if you give them 10,000 of words, they may have a problem to find the words in their device. Okay, if you have, it's like if I say, well, you can learn, let's say, Portuguese, a foreign language that you probably don't know. Okay, and all you're going to do is I'm going to give you a very thick dictionary and all the words are in it. All you have to do is to find the words and point to them. You will not like that solution because finding each word will take you a lot of time. So what is sometimes done is that in AAC is that you actually provide the person with a smaller lexicon size, okay, and make it easier for them to find them. So And I'm not going to say too much about that now because it's a whole discussion that we will address later. There is a very strong movement in AAC to say that what we actually have to provide our AAC users with is with a core vocabulary, a limited vocabulary for eventually for a few hundred of words that you use a lot, that everybody uses a lot. And if you find a system that the person can quickly access this core vocabulary, then communication will be easier, and it's more likely to succeed. So that is the third part, the core vocabulary. One other thing is I'll also will put that on the website is the role of speech language pathologist in AAC. This is what they call it a position paper of Asha, and to summarize it is that at least in the United States, the speech language pathologist plays the most important role, especially when it comes to permission for funding for IEPs. The knowledge, the expertise, the professionalism of the speech language pathologist is key. Without the signature of the speech language pathologist under the report, there will be no funding for a device. So it is really an important function, and is that the speech pathologist has, and at the same time, of course, an enormous responsibility. So these are a couple of things that you can think about what a person as a standard needs to have. Most of the times people, when we think about what is needed in the first place, are likely the needs. I need to go to the bathroom, or I'm hungry, I need help, that kind of things. But eventually you really want the person to have the whole range of pragmatic functions to communicate. I'll talk about that more later. Back to the lexicon problem. So the lexicon is really all the words, all the symbols that the person will use and can use. And so the problem is with the fact is that we often want to try to put them on screens, and we have the difficulty between deciding how many things do we want to put in the device. On the one hand, you want to have many things, and because you want the person to be able to say everything. On the other hand, the more you put on it, the harder it's going to be to find it. And so that may have an effect or a negative effect on the quality of the communication. So it's kind of you're between a rock and a hard place. So often people say that the core vocabulary is somewhat of a solution for that problem. Which is something that it's still quite a few words, quite a good number of words, but not an enormous number of words. It's core vocabulary, and these words are based on the fact that these are most frequently used, and so it's more likely you can say everything you want to say. I'm just going to let you watch for a minute a video clip about a system that is called MinSpeak. And MinSpeak it's found on PRC devices, Prentkeroemig company devices. PRC, Prentkeroemig company. It's a system where you will, when you look at the device, you will have the impression that you see just pictures. And you find it also actually on Words for Life, an app, or sometimes called LAMP, that is now available for iPads. And what you see is that you just see a number of pictures, icons, and so. But icons don't mean what they mean. You actually in order to find the word, or to generate the word that you want to say, you have to combine it with other keys. That looks at first sight, that looks like it's more complicated, but in fact it allows you really to stay mainly within the same screen. And some other devices you really have to navigate from screen to screen. So let's see if we can show you a little bit of this.
And welcome to MinSpeak Academy. This is the first video in a series that is designed to teach you the key components of Unity, a MinSpeak application program, and to teach you how to teach Unity to your AAC user. MinSpeak is a unique language representation representation system that enables AAC users to access a significant vocabulary with a small fixed number of symbols known as icons. Each of these symbols can be used to represent multiple meanings. MinSpeak stands for Minimum Effort Speech. The Unity software contains a home page that consists of icons that enable AAC users to access core vocabulary words through simple, predictable icon sequences. What is core vocabulary? Core vocabulary is basically a set of 350 to 400 words that make up about 85% of what we say. These are words such as that, get, my, turn, and need. They are used across settings, age groups, conversational topics, and geographical locations. They are among the first words that children say when they develop language. By providing simple and quick access to core vocabulary, Unity software enables the AAC user to access those words that will make up 85% of what they will say. The result is that vocabulary programming is minimized. Of course, each AAC user will want to...
Okay, we will talk about MinSpeak later because I find it a very fascinating system for many reasons. The word that I was thinking about earlier that I couldn't remember was PEX, Picture Exchange Communication System, and that is something that includes the use of transmission of the symbol. Okay, so really look at the picture here in the middle. Okay, it's really materializing. You hand over your picture to your communication partner. Partner assisted techniques is that in many AAC uses you will see that the communication partner actually plays an important role. And in typical communication is more like a game of tennis. Okay, one person is on turn, throws the ball, and then the next one picks up, throws the ball back. It's you 1-2, 1-2, back and forth. But what you're going to see often in AAC use is actually that the communication partner helps the communication, the communicator in producing their message, and multimodality. Okay, this refers to the Picture Exchange Communication System. I'm going to skip this that video clip. Okay, and so here is a very simple communication board. Okay, and what you do, and it's very clear that if I ask you what do you do if you would use that, you can just point to the things. It's very simple. Okay, now you can just, but what do you do here? Okay, are you just going to point here, or there are so many more? Okay, and so if you have a scanning system, how are you going to do that? Are you going to just go from one row to the other until you have, for example, you have to say corn? So you're going, the solution is often a scanning system. So, for example, I would indicate first that what I want is something on the 5th row. Okay, on the 5th row, and then as my communication partner, okay, I'm going to start asking, is it the strawberry you want? Is this the dog you want? Is it the horse you want? And then I'll say, I want the monkey, the third thing. So that is a form of scanning. All right. The concept of multimodal communication and the fact that you actually can throw in all the modalities that are possible. Here's a list of forms of communication that people can use: speech, writing and signing, gestures, vocalization, body positions, pictures, and eye gazing. Finally, myths and realities of AAC. This is an article by Marianne Romsky and Rose Sefcik, two researchers at the University of Georgia, and I'm going to put that article also on our class website. Okay, myth number 1 is AAC can also only be used as a last resort. Today we understand that AAC solutions are often actually something that can kickstart development and communication. So don't wait till the last minute. Actually start it rather early than later. Second, and myth 1 and myth 2 are related to each other. AAC is not dangerous. Okay, many people thought that if you use AAC because it's not speech, or people think it's not speech, then well, speech will not develop. That's not the case. Okay, there are and there's a whole chapter in the book that addresses that question. Okay, that is not the case. If you use AAC, other modalities, speech will not hinder, and it has to do with the fact how our mind works. Myth number 3 is there's the myth of the prerequisites. Okay, the prerequisites theory, an old theory that's now rejected, is that before you can start AAC, you need to meet specific standards, and that's not the case. I mean, it's like when you just use common sense. If you have a typically developing child, parents start talking to the child, start communicating with the child from day one, even if technically the child does not have the skills yet to talk, to answer, or to do anything, even to understand what's going on. But you start communicating, and then the child develops the skills through that interaction and through that communication. And the same is true for AAC. So this is another article that I also will place on the Canvas site. I like that article, especially for the title. Early cognitive skills as prerequisites for AAC. What are we waiting for? Okay, so people would say, well, you need to have symbol awareness before you can use symbols. Well, that's not true. That's simply not true. It's because you use symbols that children develop symbol awareness. It's not the other way around, which is also typical for normal children, normal developing children. No, people will not say, okay, I'm not going to talk to my child until my child has symbol awareness, because then the child will understand that the words that I'm saying are words and mean something. Okay, 3 more myths is speech generating AAC devices are only for children with intact cognition. And that was for a while the case, that many people thought that if you have a voice output device and a speech generating device, that's only for the smartest kids, and that's not true. Okay, children have to be of a certain age to be able to benefit from AAC. AAC actually the earlier started, the more effective it's going to be. And then myth number 3 is that there is a representational hierarchy of symbols from objects to written words. I'll talk about that later. Okay, but you can use pictures as symbols, but you can also use objects as symbols, and you can have like little toys, little objects, and it's not that one is better than another. That's what this actually is saying. Okay, so that was my introduction. I hope this is helpful, and we talk at other times. Bye.